Hello everybody and welcome back to another video. Today we're going to be checking out Canadians change when they hear the word war. This is by The Front here on YouTube, and I've never seen this video before, but I'm a big enjoyer of history. I like to say that I'm pretty well read on that type of thing. Always kind of have been. It's always been what I've been interested in, I should say. And obviously, in terms of it being about war in a sense, I'm not going to say that I have the most in-depth knowledge. I'm not going to say that I've served overseas or nothing like that, but I do have some personal experiences in that regard, let's say. And I thought it'd be an interesting take on it, because some of these events I might have heard of, some of them I might not have, and obviously, spending time around people who have been overseas, you hear a lot of things, you hear a lot of stories, and people talk, and I'm not trying to get too deep into all that, but within reason, kind of, I can verify, not verify things, so just from what I've heard, and I don't claim to be an expert on any of it, just simply from what I have seen, heard. That's all. It's just simply an opinion-based thing, I guess. Let's say secondhand experience, secondhand knowledge, kind of thing. Do not take it as fact. That being said, let's get right into this video because I'm excited to see what has to be said. Obviously, this is a more serious topic. It's not, it's not like my normal videos. I'm going to be more serious on this one. So if that's not for you, obviously, I'll see you guys in the next one. For those of you sticking around, I appreciate that. And leave a like, comment, subscribe, leave a like, leave your recommendations in the comments below, and subscribe for more content. Without any further delay, let's get right into it. That was a word salad. I apologize.
Sorry, not sorry. While Canadians are nowadays subject to the stereotype of hockey-loving, maple syrup-chugging, overly polite potheads, their wartime stereotypes in the First and Second World Wars had their enemies trembling in their boots and making a hot mess in their trousers. It's as if when the Canadians see the word war, their insatiable desire...
So obviously right off the bat, I'm going to say this now. Anytime Canada or British North America in general has been called to war, the enemy of us has usually received it, is what I'm going to say. That's not even to be up on our own high horse kind of thing. It's just, typically I think it comes down to the case of our culture. We're an overly polite people for the most part. We're typically not trying to look for trouble internationally. So I think it's more the case of when we are forced to do so, it's kind of just like you're forcing us to leave our fucking home in a sense. You know what I'm saying? Which is kind of like that for anyone, but I don't know, man. The tenacity of Canadian fighters has always kind of been prevalent throughout history, especially World War I, World War II, even in the Boer War and whatnot. There's instances of very heroic things coming out of there on the Canadian side. So, yeah, I just wanted to blab about that a little bit. I'll probably be pausing quite a bit through this video, so just so you guys know.
It's as if when the Canadians hear the word war, their insatiable desire for maple syrup and Canadian beer turns into an insatiable desire for blood. In saying that, however, they didn't always rush enemy positions with bayonets, meat cleavers, and spiked clubs, but were some of the most well-trained and formidable soldiers on any front in any war. In this video, we're going to explore Canadian wartime reputation, keeping our scope focused on World War II and the heroic feats of individual Canadian soldiers therein.
That makes sense. I just want to say real quick too, I have heard of The Front before. I've seen some of his other videos. I have not seen this one. So I know he obviously does historical videos in that sense. But I have not seen this one. I was thinking it would be like a kind of a broader scale kind of video, but World War II is interesting as well. There's plenty of instances of heroism coming from there.
To get the puck sliding, let's
Okay, buddy.
move our scope quickly to the First World War,
Okay,
in
buddy.
which the Canadians laid the groundwork for their reputation as shock troopers. Mostly, the troops of the Canadian Corps were known for their savage raids on enemy trenches and their unwritten take no prisoner and kill the wounded policies.
Yeah.
Locked in a stalemate in opposing trenches.
I just want to say that now. Yeah. That was doctrine for a long time, to be completely honest with you. It's the simple case of warfare, especially trench warfare, even in World War II. Canada, we have always been outnumbered as a fighting force. Always. We will always be outnumbered. We always will be. Typically, our fighting style in country is a lot like that of guerrilla forces. Out of country is a lot more like that of assault troops. Let's just say, if we're always outnumbered, that means that we can't push forward in a country. And if we can't push forward in a country, we've already lost our advantage in a sense, as to how we're trained and how we operate. So if you have to leave men behind to guard the prisoners, you're taking away from your fighting force, is basically kind of the case. And especially if Canada is operating on its own, which in World War II we did for a long time. We obviously had our own beachhead on D-Day. Yeah. That's unfortunately, it's war. That's kind of just how it was, unfortunately. And Canada was not obviously the only nation to do that. A lot of other allied nations and Axis nations did that. The Soviet Union being the most prolific of the allied nations of the time, or Comintern nations, if you want to call it that.
The Canadians devised all manner of strategies and weaponry to flip the chessboard upside down and clean up the enemy pieces. Cutting through barbed wire, they crept upon them in the cover of night with painted faces, launching either savage, unforeshadowed raids or perking up their ears and eavesdropping on enemy plans. In said raids, the Canadians gorged their bayonets with blood and made good use of improvised melee weapons, paying little attention to attempts at surrender and skewering bandaged and unarmed men just the same as men on their feet with rifles.
Yep.
They even concocted an alchemist's shelf of homebrew explosives, like pipe bombs and jam jars loaded with nails and gunpowder. I think
so that's something I also want to give way to, even modern day ingenuity, let's say. Man, we invent on the battlefield. I'm just gonna say that now. We throw some shit together, we make it work, It's fucking useful, it's a good skill to have. I think that comes from obviously a lot of, and that's the thing, Canada has a volunteer nation, right? Or a volunteer army, volunteer military. We typically try not to conscript people here in Canada. We never try to. So it's typically volunteer. You're typically there because you kind of know what you're doing. You want to serve your country. You have an interest in it, kind of thing. So with that, you get a lot of people that, are very rural. Canada has a history of trappers, a history of, woodsmen, outdoorsmen, that type of thing. So you get a lot of very inventive people, like practical people, that you get to work alongside. And man, they're good at what they do. I want to say that. Like, props to all the sappers and pioneers out there, man, because you guys kind of get it done,
It's a safe bet to say that at least one grenade is made.
And even the infantryers, man.
Jar. There are also tales of Canadian troops using temporary truces, like on Christmas Day, as a chance to catch their enemy with his stockings on, sending him grenades instead of Christmas ham, and bullets through the brain instead of season's greetings.
Oh yeah, forgot about that.
It could be argued that Canadians were acting out of vengeance, but couldn't that argument be used to justify most atrocities in most wars? Canadian
Arguably.
Lieutenant R.C. Germain's letter home to his
Arguably.
parents makes the revenge excuse about as clear as the sap from a freshly tapped maple tree.
Okay, these puns are getting a lot now.
We rushed them, and they had the nerve to throw up their hands and cry "Kamerad."
Yeah.
All the Kamerad they got was a foot of cold steel, while I blew their brains out with my revolver. Despite being...
That's the thing too, and a lot of these guys, man, like, again, well, we're an honest people. I'm not gonna lie to you. We're very honest people. A lot of people will tell you, man, the shit they did, especially if you're talking to somebody you trust, somebody you serve with, because it's really the only people that you can tell it to. In a sense, the VA in Canada, obviously, much like America's. I'm not going to say anything else than that. But you talk to people you trust, you talk to people you know, kind of thing, right? And that's just kind of how it is. And yeah, they'll straight up tell you the shit that they've done, man. It's interesting, you know. So this is believable. Yeah, absolutely. Throw your hands up. We lost half a company, especially at that time period. Nah, man.
Being a little stab happy with enemy soldiers, Canadian troops were known for being quite, as we contemporary folk have come to expect, polite to civilian populations. Before we have a look at Canadian reputation in World War II and some of its stories, it might pay to know about Canada's involvement in the war. Canada waited until the 10th of...
Why do people keep going on about a boot? I don't say a boot, I say about, you know? I fucking speak English, for Christ's sakes. Like, what's that all about? Is that an actual thing that people like honestly, do we sound like that? Do we fucking actually sound like that? Because that annoys me when I hear that, bro. Like, it actually does. It triggers me. I'm not gonna lie. Do we like? I don't sound like that. You know, fucking Trevor from GTA. I'm like him, bro. Like I don't sound like that. You know? No, I'm joking. It's a good video though. I'm enjoying the video. Just the puns are kind of killing me a little bit.
September 1939 to declare war on Germany because it didn't want to follow Britain like a Commonwealth sheep. It took Canada until the 11th of June 1940 to declare war on Italy and the 7th of December 1941 to declare it on Japan. Overall, about 10% of Canada's population fought for her and the Allies.
Which would never happen nowadays. I want to point that out now. No, we would have to massively conscript, and even if we massively conscript, I don't think it would ever come to pass. Back in the day, people served because they thought it was the right thing to do. People signed up, you know. If you look at any pictures on regiments in armories and whatnot, if you ever get to go to those museums, go check them out. You know, some armories even do open their doors to the public on certain nights, so that you can go see it. Man, you'll see their armories loaded with people, chock full of bunk beds, thousands of people crammed into there, and it's all because people were willing to serve their country, which is not something that nowadays, I think across the Western world, not just in Canada, but across the Western world, most people are willing to do. But obviously, that comes from the fact that fighting in general is most often pointless. It most often does not solve anything, and it is only a drain of resources everywhere. Infighting amongst humans in general is a waste. It makes no sense. Is what I think. I think it's utterly pointless. But you know, it's people don't have the same drive to defend their nation or to defend their nation's ideals anymore in the modern age, and I think that just comes from just cultural evolution in a sense. It's hard to really say. You know, again, I'm not an expert. I don't claim to be an expert. Just personal opinions.
1,100,000 Canadians serving in the Canadian Army, the Royal Canadian Navy, and the Royal Canadian Air Force. Of this 1,100,000, the majority were volunteers.
Exactly.
Canadians fought in almost every theatre of World War II, notably in the defense of the United Kingdom, the Battle of Hong Kong, the Dieppe Raid.
So sorry, not to pause again, but 1.1 million there. Fuck, man. I know when I was in, it was, I want to say we were sitting around 70 to 80,000. And obviously then the COVID pandemic hit and, you know, all that happened. So it's a lot less now. And I see bonuses, recruiting bonuses all the time, but it's like they're trying to get more people to join, but they have shot themselves in the foot so many times. And since World War II, Canada's military has been defunded roughly every 10 years or so. Basically, it's essentially every time a new Liberal PM gets in charge, the military funding seems to be cut for spending elsewhere, and that's not. You know, it's not necessarily a bad thing per se, but it's also definitely not a good thing at all. Especially when that money never gets returned and procurement becomes a joke, as does services within the armed forces becomes a joke. Yeah, you know, you hate to see it happen, obviously, because you know, we used to be some of the best in the world, and we still are, as far as I'm concerned. We still very much are the people serving best in the world. You know what I'm saying? You won't find a more motivated fighting force typically, but you know, it's just the case of there's not many of us anymore.
Majority were volunteers. Canadians fought in almost every theatre of World War II, notably in the defence of the United Kingdom, the Battle of Hong Kong, the Dieppe Raid, the invasions of Sicily and Italy, the Normandy landings and the liberation of France, and the liberation of Belgium and the Netherlands. The Canadian Navy escorted Allied ships across the Atlantic and maintained a high presence in the Pacific Ocean, and pilots from the Canadian Air Force flew under the wing of the British Royal Air Force. German submarines sunk Canadian naval and merchant vessels in the water of Canada and Newfoundland and attacked the loading pier at Bell Island.
Yeah.
And the Japanese also attacked a lighthouse on Vancouver Island, though little else occurred in Canadian waters.
Which is crazy. That's absolutely nuts.
Of the military operations
How many people
in which
know that?
Canadians were involved, their ferocity and inventiveness stood out in the Battle of Ortona, the Normandy landings, and the liberation of Belgium and the Netherlands. Through the medieval streets of Ortona, Italy, the Canadians and Germans engaged in brutal room-to-room, hand-to-hand fighting, with the Germans eventually having to withdraw. Here, the Canadians coined the tactic mouse holding, which is basically blowing holes in buildings to allow the passage of infantry rather than running into enemy bullets in the open. In the D-Day landings, the Canadians landed on Juno Beach, the second most resisted beachhead besides Omaha.
So Juno, obviously, Juno went pretty well for us, I'm not going to lie, all things considered. Comparatively to the other beachheads, Juno went really well. It was thankfully less defended than the rest of the beaches, especially Utah, Omaha. But we were able to make pretty easy landfall. We swept through the defense and we got into the, I forget the town that's behind Juno. I can't think of it right now, but we managed to get into the town pretty easily there. And then obviously it was a bit of a fight to link up with the British forces to the east on Sword because, the Germans fell back from the beach entirely and tried to reform their defense. But that's whatever. It's interesting to see how D-Day was fully organized. I find it extremely interesting. And yeah, man, I don't know. It's just such a huge invasion. Like, you got to think about how many people were just involved in this fucking thing. You have to respect it, no matter what. And it really just was like, the combined cumulative efforts to end an axis of evil, like straight up try to annihilate evil from the world. Because that's, what the Nazis literally stood for, as far as I'm concerned.
The second most resisted beachhead besides Omaha. The Canadians penetrated further inland than anyone else, coming up against some of the strongest units in the German military. In Belgium and the Netherlands, the Canadians spent thousands and thousands of Canadian lives to drive the Germans back and get food to the starving civilian population.
Yeah, and I will say this, props to the Netherlands and Belgium there, man. Like, they still love us even today, and they still love the Americans even today. They're so thankful. I believe we have parades there every year, just to commemorate the fallen kind of thing and whatnot there. And no, they're such a great people. They have nothing but support for us, and we have nothing but support for them. And they're, the efforts amongst the resistance in those countries during occupation times, it really fucking helped a lot. I'm not gonna lie. Like, resistance forces in occupied nations do not get enough credit. They made things so much easier for all allied forces coming into occupied countries, like, so much.
They even shared rations with civilians and gave them blankets. Some of the most intense combat here was in the Battle of Scheldt, where the Allies fought through flooded terrain against stiff German defenses for about a month. This battle alone cost the Canadians more than 6,000 casualties.
Yeah.
This latter triumph, particularly the part about getting food to the starving civilians, is certainly keeping with Canadian tendencies in the First World War, though the following atrocity paints a bit of a different picture. Canadian Lieutenant Colonel Frederick E. Wiggle was shot dead on approach to the town of Friseute, Germany, and a rumor spread that it was a civilian sniper from that town who shot him. Back on that revenge train, the Canadians burnt down the entire town, apparently moving its citizens onward before setting their homes on fire. It was discovered later that Wiggle was shot by German soldiers.
Yeah,
Now,
obviously, I don't support that. Nobody, I think will support that. Obviously, burning civilians' homes is never the right choice, regardless of who you think did it. But things like that do still happen to this day, obviously, amongst all nations, I'm sure. It's not right that the crimes of a country be taken out on its population, especially when the population, usually 9 times out of 10, literally 9 times out of 10, has absolutely nothing to do with it, or at least nothing to do with what is currently happening. You know, I encourage you all to honestly go watch some of Hitler's speeches in English. You can go do that now. Um, Obviously with AI technology, and just see, right? Because like besides his anti-Semitic speech, from the German perspective, it's not hard to see how even liberals of the time could be drawn to his side, because he was truly speaking for Germany in a sense where he wanted the country to do better. The Treaty of Versailles absolutely annihilated the country. The German population was starving on the streets, quite literally. Um, and he promised to make it better. And if you watch what he actually says, I'm not, again, obviously don't support the guy, don't support anything he says. I think for historical context, I think it makes a lot more fucking sense if you go watch it and then you formulate your own opinion off of that. That's just my opinion on it. Obviously, again, do not fucking support Hitler at all. Do not support the Nazis at all. Think that thing was an entire fucking joke. Think the, killing the civilians, regardless of race, religion, whatever, that's a fucking joke. That makes no sense at all. Yeah, it's truly an axis of evil, and the killing of civilians it's never the right call, or the burning of their homes. You should never be taking out. Again, you should never be taking out your anger for the government of a country on its civilians, because they often have nothing to do with it.
That Wiggle was shot by German soldiers. Now, the intent of emphasizing Canadian brutality in World War I and mentioning the Friseute incident is not to take away from Canadian bravery in either world conflict. Like I said before, Canadians were some of the most well-trained and formidable soldiers on any front in any war.
Yeah.
And I think the best way to communicate that is to share some stories involving some of the most heroic Canadian soldiers in World War II. On the 14th of December 1943, Canadian Captain Paul Triquet and his company, supported by an armoured squadron, tried to cross the gully and take the Casa Berardi, a hamlet on the Orto Orsona lateral, Italy. Under heavy machine gun and mortar fire, Triquet ran around organising and inspiring what remained of his men, saying, "There are enemy in front of us, behind us, and on our flanks. There is only one safe place. That is on the objective," before charging forward and breaking through the enemy line. Triquet's company and the supporting tank squadron pushed right up to the edge.
And you got to remember too, Canadian Army at this time, man, we didn't have Garens. A lot of us, we were mostly issued Leanis, right? British Lee Enfields, Mark III, Mark IVs, right? We also had the Ross rifle, but that was a fucking joke. So we got rid of that long before World War II. Yeah, man, Leanis. So you're doing it with essentially a bolt action now. I've had the opportunity to train on Leani. Most people, depending on your tasking, will get to, especially if you're going up north. It's mostly used for predator control. I'm not going to lie. There's fucking polar bears up north. Like nowadays, I mean, because we still have them. It's not like we were replacing them. Canada doesn't have funding. Yeah, you're doing all this. You're charging assault, like you're charging positions with a fucking bolt action rifle for the most part, for the average guy. It's just kind of nuts to think about, where the tenacity comes from in our fighting culture. I think that's kind of where it comes from in a sense. Like you have to be brave, and especially in World War I, like a melee weapon was more effective than a bolt action. Let's be real here, especially in close quarters combat.
Triquet's company and the supporting tank squadron pushed right up to the edge of Casa Berardi, where he set up defenses and fought off a tank-supported German counterattack with whatever weapons he could find. He held the defensive parameter against superior numbers until the rest of the battalion came in and relieved the company. Triquet's utter disregard of danger, his cheerfulness and tireless devotion inspired his men, and his tactical skill and leadership facilitated the capture at a vital point on the Ortona Orsona lateral.
And that's another thing too. Shout out to, like, all the COs and shit like that. A great attitude, for the most part. Even when things are going so fucking sour, man, you know, our leadership just has the ability to fucking inspire the men and keep going, bro. Like, it's shit. That's the point. You know what I'm saying? That's kind of what we're told. It's meant to be shit, and it's going to be shit. Expect it to be shit. You know what I'm saying? But you put a smile on your face, you crack a joke, and you keep on going. That's just kind of how it is. And yeah, I even back then, the attitude of them, to just persevere. That's all it is. Just keep persevering. It's just inspiring, is all.
On the 18th of August 1944, Canadian Major David Vivian Currie was in command of a force of tanks, self-propelled anti-tank guns, and infantry. His task was to block an escape route from the Falaise pocket in the village of Saint-Lambert-sur-Diver, Normandy. Currie went in alone to scout German defences and to free the crew of 2 Allied tanks which were previously disabled. Under heavy mortar fire, he succeeded. The Germans then kept throwing counterattacks at Currie and his men until, on the 20th, one final German counterattack was thwarted by Currie, costing the Germans some 2,900 casualties.
Jesus
Throughout
Christ.
these 3 days of intense combat, Currie displayed gallant conduct and a contempt of danger and collected and inspired his men. One of his officers said, "We knew at one stage that it was going to be a fight to the finish, but he was so cool about it, it was impossible for us to get excited." Over the 3 days, Currie barely got an hour's sleep, and when it was over, he fell asleep standing and then crashed to the ground. Currie's courage and devotion to duty had a far-reaching effect on the successful outcome of the battle.
Yeah.
French-Canadian Corporal Leo Major was also in Normandy, where he captured a German armoured vehicle which held secret codes and lost an eye to a phosphorus grenade. He stayed in service, saying that he looked like a pirate.
Yeah.
However, it wasn't in Normandy where Leo earned his first Distinguished Conduct Medal.
So nowadays, obviously, if you lose an eye in combat, you can't serve. I don't think. I seriously doubt they would let you serve still. Obviously, back in the day, they were a lot cooler with it, especially if you yourself, like, proved yourself as a capable combatant. I was like, yeah, man, go for it. Give her tits, for lack of a better word there. And, but nowadays, they'd never let something like that happen, I don't think. And it's also interesting to see his headdress there, his regimental badge. I can't really tell what it is from this picture, but I'd like to know. It's really hard to tell. The picture's very, it's obviously not great quality.
But it wasn't in Normandy where Leo earned his first Distinguished Conduct Medal, but in the Netherlands in 1945. Actually, before we go there, Leo single-handedly captured 93 Germans in the Battle of Scheld.
Yeah.
When out on a solo reconnaissance mission in 1944. He escorted all 93 of them back to his camp, where he would not accept a DCM because he considered the person awarding it to him to be incompetent.
Yeah.
Back to 1945 and the real DCM.
Chad.
After breaking his back, ribs, and both ankles when the car he was in was hit by a landmine, Leo went on a recon mission with a friend in the city of Zwolle. His friend was killed, so Major continued alone, capturing a German soldier, making the soldier take him to his officer, who was in a bar, and then telling that German officer that the Canadian artillery was going to shell and kill them all. Leo then ran through the city, firing his gun and lobbing grenades, fooling the Germans into thinking the Canadian army was invading. All through the night, Major brought captured German troops back to his camp, resting in civilian houses whenever he needed to catch his breath. He then set a Gestapo HQ on fire and assaulted a Nazi SS HQ before meeting with members of the Dutch resistance and informing them that he had liberated the entire city by himself. Yeah. I'm gonna say that last one is pure insanity. What an absolute machine.
Yeah, man.
Overall, based on the available evidence...
Look at that, man. That's an old-timey piece. I think I've actually seen either that or something very similar to that, like IRL, yeah, man, that's like the old fucking recruitment posters. You'll never get something like that nowadays, but what a great, like, poster. You know what I'm saying? Like, honestly, I love that shit.
At least. I think Canadians in World War II abandoned their unofficial take no prisoner and kill the wounded policies of World War I. Obviously, this is a generalization, and the Frieseuter incident certainly demonstrates that they were at least capable of unjust violence. Though
Everybody
there
is.
is no comparing the deeds of the Canadians to, say, the Germans, the Japanese, and the Soviets.
No, but that doesn't make it
Convinced
right.
by the stories of Paul
Still.
Triqueur, David Curry, and Leo Major, Canadian courage and formidability was in no short supply, and I believe modern-day Canadians should be proud of how the Canadian military cleaned up their act after
Absolutely.
World War I and made such a brave and significant contribution to an Allied victory in the Second World War. Anyways, guys, make sure you let me know your thoughts on Canada and some of the super soldiers we mentioned in the last bit of this video in the comments section below. And just before you go, guys, make sure you check out some of the links in the description below, where we can direct you to a place with more history buffs like yourself on our Discord, and to our Patreon page if you want to support the channel more than you already are by watching this video.
Awesome.
Also, if you're into cool history merch, then...
Well, guys, that was Canadians change when they hear the word war. Yeah, by the front. And I thought that was a great video. I thought he was, he just touched on each one of the little subjects there a little bit, and I thought that was great. I really like how he gave some of our Victoria Cross awardees a little moment of their own there, because it just kind of goes to show like everything. I also like how he touched on the war crimes a little bit, because I think it needs to be said. You know what I'm saying? I think war crimes need to be acknowledged when they happen by every nation. I don't think it's good to ignore them. I think it's the only way to acknowledge it and kind of move past it, is to, you have to recognize that it happened and why it's bad. If you ignore it, then it's very liable to just happen again, kind of thing, is how I see it. So, I appreciate him touching on that as well. Obviously, even nowadays, shit still happens. Emotions run high in combat. That's what I'll say. It's what it is, and I think anybody will tell you the same, who's done it, kind of thing. And again, I have not served overseas. That's not, and I'm not claiming to, but from what I've heard, yeah, it's, you go in there and it's, fuck, man, you hardly remember 80% of it, 90% of it. You just remember the most prominent parts, unless you're really, really used to it, unless you've gone over a couple times, But your first time over, man, like, the way I understand it, you go into the black and 80-90% of it, man, it's gone. And then you just remember the little parts. And then after the fact, then you talk about your buddies with it and you kind of put it together, what happened, that's kind of usually how it goes, to my understanding. So, I think it was a really good video. I think it touched on a lot of subjects, and I'd be interested to see if there's one that kind of spans, strictly just World War I or even the Korean War onward. Because obviously we were in Korea. A lot of shit happened in Korea. Korea was a mess. Korea was a mess for everybody, not just Canada, but for everybody. I think Korea doesn't get enough attention at all. In my personal opinion, not enough people recognize what happened there, and just how fucking radical the situation was at the time. So I'd be interested to see if there's one of those. But yeah, guys, hopefully you guys didn't mind the more serious demeanor of this video, and I'm sorry if I blabbed a lot there. Again, I just like history. I find history interesting. Obviously, talking about some of the stuff I've heard. I thought it would be an interesting kind of interpretation, an interesting video to watch with you guys, kind of thing. So yeah, if you enjoyed, please leave a like, subscribe for more content from me. And yeah, let me know your recommendations down in the comments below. I'd be more than willing to check that out, add that to the list, and hopefully get to it sometime, because, I love hearing your guys' recommendations. I love hearing what you guys want me to watch. And, so many great videos that I wouldn't know about if you guys didn't tell me. So I really appreciate that. But yeah, guys, without any further delay, this has been Centurion, and I'll see you guys in the next one. Peace, guys.